Eight most important things of psychoanalytic theory. Number one, the greatest figure in psychoanalytic theory is Sigmund Freud. Sigmund Freud was an Austrian neurologist. He was born in 1856 and died in London in 1939. Number two, unconscious mind. Psychoanalytic theory is concerned with powerful but largely unconscious motivations believed to exist in every human being. The unconscious is the major motivating force behind human behavior. The unconscious are processes which are totally unaware and which are incapable of becoming conscious unless special methods of psychoanalysis are used. These processes lie buried deep down in the hidden recesses of our mind below the level of consciousness. The unconscious includes all forgotten past experiences, our repressed wishes and desires, our fears and phobias for which we do not know the reasons. Much of what we say and do is either to find some socially acceptable way of expressing unconscious impulses or an effort to keep those impulses from being known by others. Number three, human errors. Even trivial words and actions often have deeper meaning in psychoanalysis. For example, small errors like slip of the tongue, which is also called parapraxis, has some unconscious meanings hidden inside the mind. Freud says even if someone says something by mistake, it can indicate that there is hidden unconscious desire, as well as forgetfulness. Freud says that if someone forgets something at any place, it means that they like the place and that they want to go back to that place. Freud says that mislaying objects shows lack of interest. Small things like mispronunciation of a name and making a joke are all signs of unconscious desires, wishes, and conflicts. Number four, methods of psychoanalysis. The top method is dream analysis. According to Freud, whatever we dream is related to the unconscious thoughts and emotions. Dreams can reveal a great deal of unconscious conflicts, so Sigmund Freud called dreams as the royal roads to the understanding of unconscious. Another method is free association. In this, the therapist gives a word or phrase and the subject to the subject, and the subjects have to speak whatever thoughts are coming in their mind about that word or the phrase. The another method is introspection. Introspection is a method of learning our own thoughts and feelings. Introspection is a method of study in which the subjects are required to understand their own thoughts and feelings and tell them to the therapist. Though many of the behavioral psychologists criticized introspection as a method. Number five, personality structure. Freud divides the human mind into three separate but interacting elements. They are not totally separate parts, they are not physically divisions of the brain. Instead, they are names given to psychological forces and hypothetically concepts created by Freud to explain his theory. The existence of these structures is inferred from the ways that people behave in their lives. Number one, the id. It is the reservoir of psychic energy. It is the storehouse of biological drives that from our needs for food, water, warmth, sexual gratification, and avoidance of pain. It is inborn. It is governed by the pleasure principle, the principle of hedonism. It has no link to objective reality. It looks for immediate discharge of tensions arising from biological drives without regard for logic or reason, reality or morality. It is like a demanding, selfish child. It looks only its own pleasure. It has no way of determining which way of doing things is safe and which are dangerous. Goal setting of it is not realistic. The second structure is the ego. It begins to develop soon after birth but does not become apparent until the age of about 6 months. It serves as a mediator between the id impulse and reality. Unlike the id, the ego is conscious. It operates according to the reality principle. Satisfaction of biological needs is not given up, but reality is taken into account to satisfy these biological needs. Ego takes into consideration past experiences. To obtain the most pleasure, it looks for the best time with the least pain or damage to the self. The ego cannot totally reject the id impulses, rather, like a patient parent, it attempts to control divert and protect the id. The third structure is the superego. It represents the ideals and moral standards of society as passed to the child by his or her parents in the process of socialization. Through the socialization process, the child learns the entire do's and don'ts. So, superego is not attentive to reality, nor does it differentiate between desires and actions. It constantly commands that sexual and other biological urges should be stopped and pleasure is postponed according to the ideals and morality of society. The superego has two main functions based on reinforcement processes. These are: A, for good behavior, the superego rewards the good behavior, and the consequence is a feeling of pride and self esteem. B, for bad behavior, the superego uses punishment for bad behavior, and the consequence is feeling of guilt and inferiority to the personality. According to Freud, the superego is harsh and punitive taskmaster. It wants the person to be perfect. It does not take into account individual capabilities and circumstances in the environment. I will give you an example for integration of the three personality structures. For example, when a 6-year-old child spots his favorite candy or chocolate in a supermarket, the id shouts, "I want it now, take it." The superego stops, "You shall not steal." The ego manages and comes in between. The ego mediates between them and says, "I could ask my father to buy it for me, but he might say no." Number 6, anxiety and defense mechanisms. Human personality is governed by conflict between opposing forces. That is anxiety over unacceptable motives and defense mechanisms that develop to prevent anxiety from becoming too great. How does the ego then try to reconcile, moderate the opposing goals of the id and the superego? When the ego loses its energy to resolve the divergent demands of the id, anxiety is signaled. Anxiety is a feeling of apprehension or tension that hinders our daily functioning. Anxiety arises when ego realizes that expression of an id impulse will lead to some kind of harm to the personality. The superego is making an impossible demand to the satisfaction of the biological needs. Anxiety as an alarm signal tells ego that something must be done to resolve the conflict and to protect the personality from danger. The ego therefore uses defense mechanism, a mental strategy to block the harmful forces while at the same time reducing anxiety. It protects the individual from overwhelming anxiety, punishment of the superego, and other unpleasant experiences. There are varieties of defense mechanisms. The most common defense mechanisms are as follow. Compensation. When the individual tries to overcome a failure or deficiency in one area through achieving recognition in another area, the adjustment or defense mechanism is called compensation. This enables the individual to enhance his self esteem. For example, Ali missed the birthday party of his best friend, but next day he ate at a restaurant with his friend to compensate it. Another defense mechanism is rationalization. The individual who has been frustrated or who cannot solve the problem successfully feels discomforted and restless. To lessen his feelings of anxiety, he gives reasons other than true reasons. For example, a student who cannot do well may result in excessive neatness during adulthood. They like to be very neat, clean, and very much obsessed with cleaning. The third stage is the phallic stage. It covers the never comes easily. Over the years, we have built a strong dependence upon our parents, and it is painful to separate ourselves emotionally from them. Successful resolution of the Oedipal complex may result in the formation of deep and mature love relationships with the opposite sex, enabling the personality to assume a place in the world as a fully independent, matured adult. So this was the eight eight most important things about psychoanalytic theory, which is given by Sigmund Freud.